Investors, they don't just want double-digit growth. They want a doubling of AI business, right?
They want a lot, Caroline, that's for sure. And what they overlook is what's going on with the rest of the business. I mean, look at how much share that AMD has taken from Intel. Their data center business has nearly doubled in 2024 over 2023. Its PC client business up more than 50% for the whole year. They've done a tremendous job of really taking advantage of Intel's problems, but have been doing it by being able to develop superior chips of its own.
You're right, JoAnne, they're not getting a ton of credit for that revenue beat, doubling their other unit. I'm curious if you can kind of speak to what they said about that estimate miss on the data center unit. And what does it say about AMD's standing in the AI ecosystem broadly?
Yeah, so, the problem they had with their report was that their entry into the AI side of data center is something that's a little bit slower to roll out than people were hoping, and expectations were high heading into the quarter. And so this new chip that is expected to, really push AMD into this business, more securely, and they've only just started rolling out this whole line of chips. That new chip, the MI350, isn't now expected to ramp until the second half of this year. And so consequently, their guidance was softer than expected for the data center. That doesn't take anything away from the core data center business, which continues to grow, but we are in a seasonally weaker quarter for PCs and for data center. And with a little bit less of a ramp on those new chips, the gross margin takes a bit of a hit. And so, in the semiconductor world, gross margin is everything. And so whenever you see a decline in the gross margin expectations relative to, or, outlook relative to expectations, typically stocks go down. But, more importantly, their second half outlook for this ramp remains intact. It's just become a little bit of a wait and see game. And some shorter term investors don't tolerate that well, and they get out of the stock and they say, okay, we'll get back in later. For long term investors, it becomes a ride this out moment. You don't know when sentiment is going to change. People could say, okay, it's coming in the second half. Well, that's July. Oh, maybe I should start buying it, in March, or, maybe I better get ahead of that buying spurt and buy it, later this month now that it's come down. So it's really hard to time this kind of thing. What you have to rely on is that the fundamentals are good.
Speaking of the short-term disruptions, DeepSeek also came up on the earnings call, and I was surprised to hear that the CEO projected a tone of confidence that they could actually benefit from some of these algorithmic breakthroughs. I'm curious if you can explain, how does AMD and perhaps even Qualcomm's foothold in edge devices like phones make it better positioned perhaps to handle some of the disruptions coming from a DeepSeek or models like it, as opposed to an NVIDIA that really saw its shares tank in the wake of that?
Yeah, so the DeepSeek innovation news was surprising because they were able to achieve efficiency potentially more quickly than folks had imagined. But efficiency is always something that comes to this space, right? Chips get smaller, faster, cheaper over time, but that never led folks to buy fewer chips. Same thing here. Right, the models become cheaper and more efficient over time, but that doesn't mean that folks are going to step away from buying the best chips they can. Now, AMD, Qualcomm, have more of a focus on the inference side of this. That is the use of the models, and that's where greater efficiency will mean more use. And I think that's what they're focused on. More use is good for them. It's going to mean more chips are going to be needed to roll out those applications. And so, hey, if the market shifts from the training chips, where you absolutely have to have the highest quality, most powerful NVIDIA chips, over to the inference side, where there are different components like memory and speed, that plays into their strengths.
And ARM benefits? We've got ARM and Qualcomm after the bell today.
Yeah, absolutely. ARM is more diversified, I say, more diffuse in their exposure. I mean, yes, they certainly play a role in a lot of the chips that go into the AI infrastructure, but they also are, more heavily tilted towards smartphones and in a very broad way. Qualcomm, obviously more smartphone oriented, but fortunately for them, the smartphones they go into tend to go to the higher end consumer, and that is an area that continues to be strong. So we do own Qualcomm. We've owned it for a long time for clients. We like their growth potential. We also like the income with their pretty solid dividend.